Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Cincinnati Reds. We are in the early stages of the 2025 offseason. Obviously, just one day into the offseason at this point on November 10th. And we've already made one, I don't want to say it's a significant move, but we've made one move. Traded away shortstop Nick Ahmed, who we had a $6 million option on for this coming season that we were not going to renew given his very poor bat and the fact that Arroyo did a good job replacing him over the last couple months of this season. We also had to throw in a minor league catcher, Hayden Jones, to pick up Aaron Savale from the Braves, was where he was playing most recently. And part of the reason we did that, I don't think Savale is a big-time pitcher at this point, but we are going to not make arbitration offers to three pitchers, Tyler Wells, Ian Anderson, and Kyle Wright. Kyle Wright was going to be making around $6 million. Tyler Wells was around $2 million, and Ian Anderson was going to be about $2.5, $2.6 million. So I view Savale as kind of a pretty similar pitcher to all of them, and his number is lower, so we're going to bring him on board. We will try to bring Oscar Inoa back, despite a very disappointing year last season. Nick Lodolo will be back, starting to make some pretty big money. Lefty Justin Brule, righties Alexis Diaz and Max Meyer, lefty Rever San Martin, and Clark Schmidt, who could be in the competition to be our number 5 starter, also made offers to all of those players. Also looking to bring back catcher Tyler Stevenson and outfielders Will Benson and Jared Kelnick. We are going to move on from TJ Friedel as well. I have shopped Friedel, Wright, Anderson, and Wells, and the markets for those players are essentially non-existent. I can get back a big, bad contract in return, or I can get back a player who's AAA quality player with no option years left. So I think at this point we'll certainly check in on whether there's any trade value for any of those players in a week or so. I doubt it's going to evolve and change all that much, in which case we will just move on from them and carrying their potential salaries next year. Moving on from them will put us in a decent financial situation, or probably more accurately, a better financial situation. It looks real good right now with over $25 million in available, but you can see that's because we've ripped scouting, player development, the draft budget, and international amateur free agency to extremely low levels. We want to keep some optionality open when the off-season begins. There is a thought, and this has been brought up in the comments of previous videos, that we try to get out from Aaron Nola's contract, which I agree would be good if we could do in a perfect world. We did structure the contract so it will be declining in value a bit, which makes it a little more palatable. But right now, we also had to give him a no-trade clause to get him to sign with us a couple seasons ago, and he's unwilling to waive his no-trade clause. If he was willing to waive that no-trade clause, we'd consider replacing him with Chris Paddock, who we brought on near the trade deadline and pitched pretty well for us last year. But Paddock, unfortunately, is looking for average of $18 million a year. I think we're willing to let him hit the market. We've already got Corbin Burns and Aaron Nola, who are on the wrong side of 30 with pretty big contracts. Paddock's going to turn 30 in just a couple of months. If he's still on the market in a month and a half from now, and Nola's willing to waive his no-trade clause, and we could kind of make a swap from Nola to Paddock to save a little bit of money and perhaps add something of value in return for Nola, we'll certainly consider doing that down the line. I don't think it's our base case expectation that that's going to happen, but that is one of the things that we will be keeping our eyes on in the coming weeks and months. And if that doesn't materialize, we're likely to head into next year with Burns, Lodolo, Nola as our top three starters. The likes of Huascar Inoa and or Clark Schmidt likely fighting for the fifth spot in our rotation. And we will likely be promoting the young pitcher Chase Petty to see what he can potentially do as our fourth starter next year, coming off of a nice year where he's combined 10-6 between AA and AAA. He's going to be turning 23 around opening day next year, and I think it's probably about time to see what he can do at the major league level. He's got the 40 stamina, so probably going to be a 5-ish, maybe a little longer inning type of pitcher for us, but with the good bullpen that we did have last year, hopefully if he does end up in the starting rotation for us, even if he's only going 5-6 innings normally, we'll still get some good relief out of the pen to hopefully secure a good number of victories for Mr. Petty next year. But depending on how things evolve in the trade market, depending on how things evolve in free agency, could be an interesting international free agent who comes over. There's lots of different options for us to potentially make some changes to our rotation in our team as the offseason begins in earnest when free agency starts in a few weeks. So we want to make sure that we've got some money available to at least play with, even though hopefully before the season starts, our scouting, development, draft, and international amateur free agent budgets will be significantly larger than they are penciled in today. And we've started to get some of those arbitration-eligible players signed. The fans were pleased with the extensions for Nick Lodolo, Jared Kelnick, Tyler Stevenson, and Clark Schmidt. But didn't seem like the fans were excessively thrilled with any of those. You can see we picked up 1 point on each of those 4 signings in fan interest to take us to 75 from 71. So made a little bit of progress there. Taking a look, we're still waiting to hear back from Savali and Alexis Diaz, and probably will shop some of those players that were likely to move on from one final time in the coming days, just to see if maybe we can extract a little bit of value out of them. And we're also going to run our second international amateur free agent camp here now that we've gotten to mid-November. Going to run through the exact same crew that we had here in October. Don't feel the need to move on from anybody yet. Hopefully we can keep moving our scouting accuracy up, keep building better relationships with those players. We've got a few strong relationships now. We've got average scouting accuracy on half of the guys, and we've still got another 2 private training sessions that we can run, and we can also continue to actively scout all of those players. Right now we're in the midst of our second time through scouting all of the international amateur free agents, so hopefully we can continue to get a better read on those players and their potential, and see if maybe we can land a future star when we get to that point in January. And you may remember that around a year ago we tried to trade for pitcher Andre Palante from the Cardinals organization. Our scout thinks he's a decent pitcher. Certainly has a 5-pitch arsenal and enough stamina to start. And he's kind of been trapped in the St. Louis organization. He pitched in 4 games in 2023, 2 in 2024, and 4 last year. While he's been in the majors, he's done fine. He actually pitched more significantly in 2022 with the Cardinals. But he's just never really caught on with them. But he's still making the major league minimum at this point. And we just threw out an offer of TJ Friedel and Ian Anderson, 2 of the guys that we were going to move on from for him. And they want some of our top prospects, Chase Petty, Austin Hedrick, Encarnacion Strand, Nelvi Marte, Joshua Hod. But they're also willing to accept Will Warren or Connor Phillips to get the deal done. Now, Connor Phillips has great stuff, and well, not great, but has very good stuff and very good movement. But his control is brutal, and that's why we haven't really given him much of a chance. He was up for 4 games with us in 2024. Didn't really do too much of anything. I do like the fact that he's got 1 option year left, but with that 30 control, you can see he walked almost a batter per inning last year in AAA. I just don't see him having a big role in my rotation. Could also put in Will Warren, but Will Warren with 2 option years left actually has more. And he's actually been a pretty productive pitcher for us the last season and a half since we brought him on board from the Yankees. So I think I'm going to do this trade. I'm going to put in Phillips simply because with that brutal control, I'm never going to want to use him. And I think that Palante, as far as a 4th or 5th starter for us, could give us a relatively inexpensive option that could help us fit those 4th and 5th roles, or potentially at least be an interesting arm for us out of the bullpen. So we are going to add in Connor Phillips, and we are going to go ahead and complete that trade, get a couple of other option-eligible players off of our team, and I think that hopefully Palante can definitely help hopefully shore up the back end of the rotation for us. And we also threw an offer out there for a left-handed pitcher, Jacob Lopez, with a somewhat similar profile. He was up for 20 games with Tampa this year, had a 2.30 ERA, so he's been pretty successful in his major league debut. Doesn't have perfect stamina to be a starter, but still a pitching profile with 3 above-average pitches and above-average stuff movement and even slightly above-average control, that although he doesn't throw incredibly hard, I think he could still be a useful pitcher, certainly out of our bullpen, and potentially as a 4th or 5th starter for us. We did offer Kyle Wright, as well as a somewhat legitimate prospect in Ariel Almonte. He's been languishing in rookie ball for us, but certainly looks like he could have above-average home run power, above-average eye, and be a slightly above-average defensive outfielder. Going to be 22 years old soon. The issue is, though, it will take those two and a big-time player for us, a big-time player or a big-time prospect for us to be able to make this trade. So I don't think I'm going to give them exactly what they want, but I've got a couple other options that I may include and try to piece something together that works for the Rays. With the fact that we just added Palante and we would be adding Lopez, if they have any or ascribe any value to Aaron Savale, I'd be happy to add him. Unfortunately, it looks like they cannot afford to bring Savale on board. So it seems like they're in a pretty tenuous financial position in Tampa Bay at this point. The other guy that I am going to try adding in is Oswaldo Cabrera. We brought him on board relatively early in the playthrough, traded for the Yankees, but he's been languishing for this past season in AAA for us with the good young infielders we have, and the fact that his bat hasn't really developed all that much. Hit 211 in 2024 when he was last up for an extended period of time with the Reds. And he's also in his last option year right now. So I would include him. I don't think that's going to be enough to quite move the needle, but I'd like to get something done. I'd love to add in Lopez and Palante again. I don't see them being top of the rotation guys, but they could be good, solid relievers and potentially be 4th and 5th starters, or at least in the mix for that conversation with us. And give us a little more optionality with younger pitchers on our team. And unfortunately for me, adding Cabrera into the deal didn't move who would get it done at all. They want the young infielder Braylon Minier, probably the top prospect in our system, number 13 prospect in baseball. He ended up suffering some injury issues this year, or he would have ended up in AAA. Played 88 games in AA, where he hit 300 with 10 home runs. But you can see he had that strained hammy that happened in late July, and that basically kept him out the rest of the season, unfortunately. Nelvi Marte, who is going to be a very strong contender for Rookie of the Year. Not going to give him up. Joshua Hod, one of the better pitching prospects in our organization, guy that we picked in the first round a couple of years ago. And Carlos Jorge, another pretty interesting infield prospect. So we are not so smitten with Jacob Lopez that we would add in one of those players to get this deal done. And it does look like we won a Silver Slugger. I would have to think that Ellie De La Cruz would have been a very strong candidate. Nelvi Marte, actually, interesting. We were just talking about the excellent rookie. Surprised that Ellie De La Cruz not named. Looks like Taheji Suga of the Nationals, who was a big free agent last offseason, won the Silver Slugger at first base. But Ellie De La Cruz had a pretty big year for us. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be getting more MVP votes than Taheji Suga, even though Suga did win the Silver Slugger over him for this 2025 season. And it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to pull off a deal for Jacob Lopez, unfortunately. We even added in another prospect, Yerlin Confidan, decent hitting prospect, with at least in terms of his power and his eye. And they're still looking for the same four players, Nelvi Marte, who just won a Silver Slugger, or three of the top prospects, one of those three players who are among the top prospects in our system would get the deal done, and that seems like a little bit high of a price to pay from my perspective. Thinking about Marte, the Rookie of the Year was announced today. We didn't get a special email on it, so clearly he did not win the award, but I'm pretty confident he's going to have gotten some votes, so we'll check out what happened in that Rookie of the Year voting before we see how we did in the Manager of the Year, Silver Slugger, and Cy Young Award. How interestingly, Suga, who came over from Japan and won the Silver Slugger at first base over De La Cruz, was a unanimous winner. I kind of forgot that he is technically a rookie, so that 41 homer season certainly caught the attention of the voters, but we're not going to apologize for Marte's season. 267 average, 30 home runs, 26 steals, 4 WAR on the year with a 114 OPS plus, 117 WRC plus. Definitely put up the type of season playing second base for us that a lot of years is going to win a Rookie of the Year award. Just turned out that this was not one of those seasons. And checked in one final time to see what we could potentially get for Kyle Wright, who's set to make about $6 million in arbitration in trade. We can pick up Evan White, who's signed to an awful contract, Brady Singer, who's signed to an awful contract, or Ronald Herrera, a 30-year-old reliever who would not make our roster. I guess he does have one option year left, but I'd rather not even be playing the Major League minimum for him next year. So we will just let Mr. Wright, as well as Mr. Tyler Wells, two guys who have been fifth starters for us in the past, and in the case of Wells, pretty effective for us 2 seasons ago. Going to let both of those guys hit free agency and get nothing for them, but don't think that the money that they're looking for in arbitration makes sense for us to pay. And we'll take a look at the big award winners now. Luis Castillo of the Mariners, 17-12 with a 2.91 ERA, won the AL Cy Young Award, helped pitch the Mariners into the World Series. National League, Cade Cavalli, unanimous Cy Young Award winner, going 20-6 with a 2.68 ERA. R. Corbin Burns, who was 15-6 with a 3.30 ERA, finished second in the voting. And Nick Lodolo, who was last year's runner-up, finished fourth in the voting this year, 17-12, 3.37 ERA. Both of those gentlemen will be back next year to hopefully continue anchoring our rotation. And turning to the MVP award winners, Aaron Judge won the Triple Crown for the Yankees. Not surprisingly, was a unanimous Cy Young Award winner. And Austin Riley for the Atlanta Braves, the third baseman, 297 average, 34 homers, 131 ribbies, did win the MVP award. And I was wrong. Suga ended up finishing second in the voting. Our first baseman, Ellie De La Cruz, third in the voting. Had a real nice year for us, 294 average, 31 homers, 111 runs scored, drove in 88, led the league with 7 triples and 47 stolen bases, a WAR of almost 6. But he ends up getting no hardware, no Gold Glove, no Silver Slugger, and no MVP award. And Corbin Burns also got a few votes for NL MVP, in addition to obviously finishing as the runner-up for the Cy Young Award this season. And we've made it to the start of free agency. A few interesting players for us to think about there if we are trying to bolster our rotation. Zach Gallen, Dylan Cease as potential starting pitchers, and then Devin Williams, excellent reliever out there as well. Also take a look at the international free agents who hit the market. There was a pretty impressive group last year. Arturo Uribe, 32-year-old, kind of a borderline starting pitcher, certainly has the stamina to do it. His stuff is not exceptional, but he does have a 6-pitch arsenal of average pitches, basically. Decent movement, excellent control. Don't know a ton about him right now. Looking for $16 million, so tend to think there's probably going to be better value in some of the more established pitchers on the market, but we'll certainly get an updated scouting report on him. Second baseman Alfredo Aguirre out of Cuba. Great gap power, great eye, but not very good contact and brutal home run power. Looks like he might be willing to sign a minor league contract, though. It looks like he's already signed with somebody. That's why I don't see anything. He's already signed with the Cubs, so no need to spend any more time thinking about him. Second baseman Sotaro Nakatani. Looks like a decent player. Don't love the poor arm. Clearly that explains why he's at second base. Can't really play him in the outfield with that rag arm. Not really tall enough to be an ideal first baseman, but still an interesting bat. Don't see us having the money to really seriously chase after him. Shortstop Tokyo Sasaki, already signed with the Miami Marlins. Interesting prospect. Signed as a minor leaguer with them, too. Interesting. He could have been someone interesting to at least have a conversation with. Left fielder Min Jae Kim. Looks like not a horrible bat. Only looking for $2.4 million. We'll at least start scouting him up. Certainly not going to run out to get him. And then Juan Pardo, 24-year-old out of Mexico. Not the most exciting prospect. I'll offer him a minor league contract. Not sure if he'll agree to that or not, and we'll certainly request a scouting report on him as well. So we've got some money to spend, but again, we don't really have money to spend because we need to get our international amateur free agent budget and our player development and scouting up to respectable levels at the very least. So just moving them up to anything more than minimal levels, as you can see, severely limits our ability to sign anyone to extensions. So a multi-year big free agent contract will be difficult for us. But we do have money available to bring on one-year free agent deals. Now, clearly, we'd want scouting and player development in particular to be higher than they are. So we really don't even have that kind of money to spend. As free agency begins, we'll see what Nola's thinking about his no-trade clause. Yeah, still says he's not willing to waive it. So presumably if we shop him around, we're not going to get any answers. Maybe at some point in the offseason, he will be willing to entertain waiving that no-trade clause, which could give us some interesting options. I think I've kind of talked about the top starting pitching prospects already. Uribe, the Cuban import, Cease and Gallen we've talked about. Nathan Eovaldi, Shane Bieber. Don't love the below-average movement on their pitches for playing in Great American Ballpark. Similarly, you could say the same thing about Lucas Giolito. Chris Paddock, wouldn't mind having him back, but certainly not going to be paying $20 million a year for him. So I think that the most interesting to think about are probably Gallen and Cease. Gallen profiles as a little bit above average in everything. 5-pitch arsenal, ranging between a bit below average to a bit above average, and then a pretty solid, good fastball. He's been a consistent, solid starter for the Diamondbacks, who are the team that took us out of the playoffs this postseason the last few years. 3 years at $13 million a year. It's something for us to consider if we were able to get out from that Nola contract, which I just don't know if we're going to be able to do. Dylan Cease, don't love the control, but a nice 4-pitch arsenal, pretty good stuff, above average movement. Another guy who consistently goes out, gives you 200 innings every year, good, solid, respectable starter. He's looking for a longer deal, similar money, 14-ish million a year. I think I'd prefer Gallen, just with a shorter commitment that we'd potentially have to make. Again, the only way this is going to work, though, is if we're able to get Nola off the books, or if we are willing to go back and completely strip our scouting and development budgets down to practically nothing. But I'm at least going to, for the time being, pull them down to a level where we could make an offer to Mr. Gallen. If we wanted to, we'd at least have extension money available. And then the hope would obviously be that at some point later in the offseason, Nola would be willing to potentially waive his no-trade clause, and we could essentially swap out Nola for Gallen. So we save some money in terms of what we're paying. We get a pitcher who's a little bit younger, and our thought is that in terms of their performance on the field, it's probably going to be pretty similar. So that's definitely the key thing that I'll be thinking about between now and the next episode. If you've got thoughts on how we should proceed, obviously would love to hear those. We'll take a look at what David Bell would recommend doing with the staff in the bullpen now. He's got Ynoa and Schmidt in as the 4 and 5 starters. Schmidt was very successful in a limited sample size as a starter for us this year. Ynoa was very unsuccessful in a more representative sample size as a starter for us this year. Meyer, Palante, Will Warren, River San Martin, even Aaron Savale are all guys who could be in the battle for those fourth and fifth starter roles also. And then, as I talked about at the beginning of this episode, Chase Petty, I think, is certainly going to be in the mix for a spot in our rotation. He really has nothing left to prove in the minors, so hard to imagine that he's not going to be on the team at the major league level in some role. I think the question is whether he's a fourth or fifth starter for us or he's pitching out of the pen. Right now, I think my inclination would be to put Petty in as our four starter over Inoa, keep Schmidt in the 5 hole. But clearly, if we're able to make some other trades this offseason and or do some damage in the free agent market, it could be a somewhat different rotation than we expect. The only things that I would say are for sure is that Burns and Lodolo are going to once again be at the top of the rotation. And moving on to our everyday players at this point, we don't have a ton that we need to do this offseason. Stevenson is back as catcher. De La Cruz is going to be at first. Marte at second. Encarnacion, McLean, and Vera all in a battle for third base. And Arroyo is going to take over as our full-time shortstop with the departure of Nick Ahmed. Hendrick in left. Kelnick in right. And some combination of Kodama and Allen fighting for the center field starting job, with Will Benson in the mix as a fourth or fifth outfielder for us. So, and we do, as I talked about, have some talent. Minier, if it wasn't for that injury, would have been up in AAA for us last year. He looks, when you just look at his batting profile, like he is very close to being ready to be a pretty productive major league player. I think we will start him in AAA. You can see we've got him trained up in second and short over the years. Probably will also give an opportunity to play every day at third base there just to improve his defensive versatility. I don't love him defensively at any of those positions, but with that bat, he certainly can play second or third for us. Would love a little more range at second. Would love a little better arm at third. But again, with that bat, I think we'll be willing to live with someone who is not a gold glove caliber defender at those positions. So he's not far away. Sal Stewart, 280 average and 20 homers in AAA for us, the number 88 prospect in baseball. Bat doesn't look like it's quite ready to be a corner outfielder or a productive corner outfielder in the majors, but he'll certainly be starting the year in AAA, so he is not far away either. And we still have Wilyer Abreu, who has spent some time in Cincinnati the last few years since we picked him up as a Rule 5 guy. Jose Barrero, and then Alan Cerda, who's now 26 years old. Not really a prospect at this point, but hitting 266 with 26 homers in AAA this year. You look at that home run power and you look at that eye, and he certainly, if we have some injuries to the outfield, we'd be more than comfortable having him play a corner outfield spot for us, or more likely just serve as a fourth or fifth outfielder for us for 2 or 3 weeks during the season. So I don't feel like there's a ton we need to do with either the pitching or the hitting. We are coming off of an 89-win season, 2 straight years in the playoffs. So it's a solid, respectable team. I think the potential addition by subtraction, if we're able to get Nola off the books and potentially bring Gallen on board, is something that we are going to be seriously thinking about between now and our next episode. And clearly, if there's an interesting trade offer that comes our way, or we do a little bit of scouting and find someone that we're just dying to get onto the team and we're willing to trade away a few big prospects to get him here, there's a lot of different directions we can go this offseason. So if you have thoughts on what we should do would love to hear them in the comments down below. Until our next episode, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.